What's one political question that always comes up about the Western Cape and coloureds in the Western Cape? Why do they always vote for the DA? I finally went and found an academic paper that does a really interesting analysis of how this happened. Because I think answering this question gives us a better understanding of how the DA reached where they are today. All of that started with them gaining power in the Western Cape. And this is going to be a very, very interesting series of videos that I'm hoping to unpack with you guys so that we can both learn through this journey and get a better understanding of what actually is happening. Because it's not as simple as just what media says about what's going on in the Western Cape. And it's not just as simple as the things that we hear on social media, TikTok, Facebook, whatever platform you are using. But it does make for an interesting conversation, and I think it also gives us a better nuanced idea, a better in-depth, detailed understanding of what actually went on. Now, I'll start off by telling you this, and this really shocked me. 1994, our first vote for an opportunity for democracy. The Western Cape voted for the National Party. The largest percentage of votes in the Western Cape, I think it's about 53% of the vote, went to the National Party. The same party who had given us apartheid for decades. And that blew my mind to read. The ANC in 1994 got about 30%, I think, a third of the votes in the Western Cape. Same amount that they got in KZN also, but much less in comparison to the rest of the 7 provinces. So how did that happen? Why did that happen? What about the Western Cape made them vote for the NP in 1994? This is what I'm hoping to get to unpack with you guys. And let's see what we learn. So let's get started. Like we already said, this starts out in 1994 with the Western Cape voting in the National Party. The National Party getting the majority of the votes at 54%. But over a 10-year period, that shifted drastically. By 2004, the ANC had gotten about 45% of the share of votes in the Western Cape. And the NP, which at that time had changed to the NNP, only got about 11% of the votes. So let's try to see if we can unpack what happens in between here, how this change happened, even what it was about the 1994 election that baffles me about why they would have voted for the NP in the first place. So we're going to start off by looking at this table. The table says votes for major parties in elections in the Western Cape from 1994 to 2004, not 1004. But I just want to focus on 2 parties. So you can see here we've got 1994 provincial elections. Then we've got 96 local, 99 provincial, 2000 local, 2004 provincial. I just want to focus on the ANC, the NP, and the DA, of course, in the later years. So in 1994, we can see that the NP gets 53% of the vote. The ANC gets 33%. Then in the 96 local elections, the NP gets 48%, the ANC gets 37%. So just a few percentage points change over there. Then in 1999, we see a very big change in the provincial vote. The NP gets 38% of the vote, the ANC gets 42% of the vote. And then in 2000, in the local elections, we finally have the DA. The DA gets 50% of the vote, the ANC gets 39%. And then 2004 provincial elections, the DA only got 27% of the votes and the ANC got 45%. So you can see if you look across at the ANC, 94 they get 33, 96 they get 37, 99 they get 42, 2000 they get 39, but then provincial they get 45. So you can see there is a steady increase in the votes for the ANC during this period. Okay, now, focusing just on 1994. Again, my mind was blown when I read that the majority of the Western Cape voted for the NP. But in the study, we find that it's not at all as simple as just to say that in the Western Cape, colored people just voted like that. That all the coloreds in the Western Cape just voted for the National Party because, again, this is also very important for us to understand. While the national demographics of the country tells us that about 80% of the population are black South African, 7 or 8% is colored South African, 7% is white, and then Indian and Asian. The Western Cape in particular is very different. Coloreds make up roughly 50%, depending on where you read. Some say 50%, others say about 40 odd percent, but they make up the majority of the population within the Western Cape. So it's very easy by that logic to just assume and blame the colored vote on why the NP and even the DA later on gained the majority of the votes. But this study shows us something very different. Number one, it shows us that during the early elections, the ANC mostly focused on getting support from black African areas in the Western Cape. The National Party mostly focused on the richer white areas. So where the battle really happened in the Western Cape between the ANC and the NP was in the colored communities because they made up the majority of the votes. But that also created an interesting problem for both of those parties. The concern was, if they put too much attention on the colored areas, would that end up meaning that they would lose support from their core groups? So this determined a lot of the strategy that they applied on where they gave attention in the colored areas and where they didn't. So two very interesting findings was that poorer colored communities mostly voted for the NP. Middle-class colored families actually mostly voted for the ANC. Some didn't. What's very interesting is they also found that in 93, before the 94 elections, in a survey that I think they carried out, they found that 50% of coloreds in the Western Cape didn't actually know who they were going to vote for between the ANC and the NP. So that meant that there was a lot of opportunity for both of these parties to capitalize on those uncertain votes and draw them towards their particular party. And this is where psychology comes in, which is very interesting for me personally. So remember, the NP won most of their votes in poorer colored communities. The question is, how did they do that? It was kind of agreed upon that the two major issues that needed to be addressed were job opportunities and crime, especially in colored communities. The ANC, however, focused on the RDP housing program, which made sense because it appealed to their major voting group, which were black South Africans. Now, of course, not only in the Western Cape, but across the country, black South Africans have always lived largely within informal settlements, in shacks. And for those who have never been inside a township, who have never been inside a shack, you cannot understand what those living conditions are like. In the time when I used to play football and we used to go into places like Nyanga and Koogs and Kailicha, and even when I worked for an NPO and we used to go into some of these communities, when I saw what these homes were like, it blew my mind. How do they survive? So it made sense that that program was important, but because of the way that the apartheid system was built, remember, colored communities still at least had some form of stable, sustainable brick housing, even if the homes were ridiculously tiny, but they had them. So to colored communities, they saw the RTP program as a great idea, but they themselves were not actually going to benefit very much from it. Okay, so I needed to come back and re-record the second part of this video because after recording it last night, there was so much information that I found that really helps to explain just how serious the next part is and the impact that it had on the vote, not only in 1994, but the ripple effect that had into getting the DA in power in 2000 and leading to what we have now today. So first, let me just show you an example of one of the campaigns, the ad campaigns that was run by the ANC. This is one of the ads that actually went to the Western Cape, right? So it talks about 5 reasons why you should vote for the ANC. Plan to build a better life for all, track record of working with ordinary people for freedom, right? A concrete plan to create jobs and provide free quality education. Look at that. By the way, for that free quality education, it said 10 years of free quality education for all children was part of the plan. I wish that they had followed through with that. Anyway, and then also a program to bring about equality and respect for women, concrete steps to bring peace and security to our land. That was the campaigning image. Then another one is a better life for all, right? And you can kind of read through that. You can pause the video and read through that. But this is just an idea of the positive campaigning that was coming from the ANC. What the NP did is psychologically sickening and disgusting if you really read in depth at what they did. And in this video, I'm not going to touch on all of it. I'm just going to make a couple of examples, and I'll make another video entirely dedicated to this negative campaign. Now, this comes from African Affairs in 1996, and we can see it says, Selling Change, Advertisements for the 1994 South African Elections by Eve Bertelsen. Very interesting article or write-up to go through. And I highly suggest if you can find it online, go and have a look. But there's a very particular section that I just want to focus on. This is what she says. While I'm concentrating on press ads here, I can't resist some reference to the infamous comic book, something of a stroke of genius by the NP, and described by Franklin Sonn as the dirtiest piece of election trickery I have ever seen anywhere in the world. About 70,000 copies of this photo comic were distributed to Western Cape schools during the latter half of March 1994, but it was withdrawn after complaints to the IEC. The narrative is roughly as follows. The Abramse family, take note of the name that they use there, and their dog, Eidsmate, agonize over their vote. Pa supports the new NP, the new NP. Notice the wording. Son Cedric is a student with a soft spot for the ANC. Eidsmate, the dog, is a cynic with a good line in canine puns. We are led through burning schools and necklacing and slogans of kill a colored, kill a farmer. These are the words of the dog. Kill a colored, kill a farmer. Where have we heard that before? Where have we heard that recently? So now can we understand how far back this line goes? Then it goes on to say, teenage communists attacking churchgoers and radical colored youth discarded as useful idiots by their black comrades. But finally, all is well. Family and dog opt for de Klerk and find peace and prosperity with the new, caring National Party. Now remember earlier, I mentioned that within the Western Cape, coloureds made up in 1994 about 50 to 54% of the population. Also, whites made up about 21%. Black South Africans also then only made up about 21%. The NP used those numbers and incidents that happened within the poorer coloured communities where they got most of their votes to add fuel to this fear of the ANC. In Mitchell's Plain, there was a case where squatters moved into homes that were initially meant for the coloured communities in that area. Many of those squatters who moved in were from black South Africans. Some of them were also coloured, by the way. But the point is, the NP used that incident to maximize anti-black rhetoric within their ad campaigns. And then they just left the aftermath for the ANC to try to diffuse. But the damage was far too great. In fact, even today, when we look at the population numbers now in the Western Cape, coloureds no longer make up the major part of the population anymore. Now it's around 44, 45%, and black South Africans are about 39%. Now, one of the most obvious questions is, how would the coloureds have forgotten about everything that they had gone through with the NP before that? Being thrown out of their homes in the 1950s through the Group Areas Act, beatings and shootings within their communities by law enforcement. How did they completely forget about that? Their campaign was so strong that they painted this image of a new national party. One where you would no longer have to worry about the injustices of the past, where you could be safe where you are now, that no one would change the status quo. It's insane to realize the impact that that one campaign had on the Western Cape and the ripple effect that that has had up until today. So in closing, what can we learn about the 94 election specifically from this perspective? Number one, the coloured vote was not simply just a coloured vote for the NP. There were many who were on the fence. The 93 survey showed that 50% of coloureds were not sure about where they were going to go before the election. Number two, while the NP focused on a campaign of fear tactics, the ANC's messaging wasn't right to really garner the support that it needed. And it was that fear of their housing being taken over that led the poorer coloured communities to place their vote the way that they did. In the comment section, I'm really looking forward to your guys' thoughts. What do you think about this narrative? If you want, in the description, I'll put down the actual paper that I read for you guys to go and check out, to see the stats on this, to see the numbers on this. It's a very, very interesting paper to look into. And I think it does teach us a little bit more about what it is that happened in the Western Cape. Catch you guys in the next video.